Alright, so when I got to work today, I actually realized the book I'm reading, I left it at home. So it got me thinking, what are some of my favorite books of all time? I started putting together a little list, so these are going to be like five mostly business, mostly marketing focused books, but just five favorite books. So to get started, there's a couple I just want to get out of the way because I feel like they're on almost every list. They are great, so these are like obligatory ones that I have to feel like I almost have to have, especially if I'm going to be talking about marketing. Because I would 100% recommend reading these ones first. Uh, I don't want them to be part of the five that I'm talking about today. So the first one, breakthrough advertising. So that's just one of the all-time advertising just foundational books I've read. Expensive to get your hands on, but not as expensive as one of the other books on this list, which is insane. But great book to actually just build a foundation, start understanding phases of awareness when it comes to advertising and kind of how to think through it. It's dense, but worth a read. Moving on, I have really anything Seth Godin, and actually, this one deserves to be on the list. This one's probably my favorite. All marketers are storytellers, or all marketers are liars. By far, one of my favorite ones, just for how it gets you to think about advertising, and that's what I love about Seth Godin's work in general. Is it's not necessarily go do one, two, and three. It's how do you think through these problems, so that way you don't need Seth Godin. Well, I still need Seth Godin, but you don't need to depend on some formula. But all marketers are storytellers. Purple Cow, Linchpin, This Is Marketing. Those are probably my top four or five. Then the last obligatory ones, we've got the ones that have been talked about so much over these last couple years, and it's $100 million leads, $100 million offers. Both of them right there. 100% read those. And what I really love about $100 million offers too, but $100 million leads more so, is that it takes a lot of the marketing information out there and the business information, and it gives you a framework to actually think through it. So you can sort of start making sense of a lot of the mess because there's a lot of different things you could be doing out there, but once you understand how to think through it, all of a sudden it makes things a lot more clear than you should be focusing on. But one of the problems I've ran into in the past is when you don't know, when you don't have a lot of clarity, you try a lot of things. So when I first got started, I would read books about webinars, books about video sales letters, books about written sales letters, and then I would have that tool and I would just want to use that tool, and it's like having a hammer, so everything looks like a nail. But once you understand, that's like the but $100 million leads more or less gives you the toolbox. So you can see all these different tools in there and you have them all at your disposal rather than just carrying around whatever tool you're reading about at the time, because that was a bad habit that I had for a long time. But now going into some that are a little less common, I guess you could say, and five of my favorites that have really formed the foundation of how I think through business, marketing, and then a little bit of life. First one is something I actually don't have a physical book of. I had to read it on Kindle. This is one because you can get breakthrough advertising for about $250, somewhere in that ballpark. But this one I consistently see online for 400, 500. I just don't know if they don't print it. I actually looked on Amazon today. I was like, oh, maybe I could pick one up. The hardcover is $1,200. In what world? But it is amazing though. I don't know if I would justify $1,200 amazing when you could buy it for $10 in the Kindle version. This book is great leads. It's almost to me like a follow-up to breakthrough advertising, as it takes some of the principles, explains them in a slightly different way so it helps connect better. I actually read these back to back and it worked perfectly, but then it actually gives you a little bit more of actionable takeaways where you can start implementing this into writing the leads of especially the campaigns you're creating. And I just have a whole note section of my phone between just those two books right there. If you're getting into copywriting or marketing or anything along those lines, like those two books, foundational. Now the next one, this one I believe has, let me see, 25 Goodreads reviews. I have never seen anybody else talk about this book, but last year I went on a deep dive of learning KPIs and data that is involved in a business to make it successful. And this was, if I think I read 8 to 10 books over the course of 2 or 3 months. something, a lot of books, very short window, and this one was by far the best. It's called Growth Units. Paul Orlando actually teaches at USC about this topic of just going into learn to calculate customer acquisition costs, lifetime value, and why your business behaves the way they do, and why businesses behave the way they do. Super straightforward, super to the point. Understand the metrics that matter in your business, and it does not go into all these storytelling metrics. Those are good to know, good to understand the relationships, but this is like foundational and by far best one. And it actually teaches you not just like one way to calculate LTV, but what are multiple different ways, what's the best, how can you implement that in your business. Huge. The next one, this one I actually read a couple years ago. It's been in my top favorite books for a long time. You can just see this is actually when I used to fold not just the top corners dog ear of where I'm at in the book, but I'd fold the bottom corners. That way I could go back and see the valuable areas and take notes on those even more detail. But I absolutely marked this book up. You can see, I don't know if the camera will focus, but I marked 50% of the pages to go back and just take notes on this. And it's just understanding how ideas stick in customers' minds, because it's awesome to have a big idea, and that's what Great Leads gets into, which is huge. It's important. But how can you make this idea sticky for somebody? How can they grasp onto it and just instantly, like, it just makes sense? And this is so, like, one of the brands that just immediately comes to mind when I think of stickiness is Liquid Death, as they are death to plastic bottles, and it's just a mission that it builds the mission into the name, creates a name that stands out, creates a product in a beer can looking thing, so you just see it and it just subverts all your expectations, but and it's simple enough that you just instantly understand it, and just that unexpectedness factor, it makes it easy to stand out, which is really cool. And so it's like, how can you take your ideas and position them in a way that has that same effect? Because even just taking the same business, and there's a podcast I was listening to the other day with John Fio, and he was talking about how it was a year and a half that he was working on a candle company, which was originally supposed to be involved like zodiac signs, but then they had just worked on that positioning just a little bit, and then they eventually were able to land on the positioning they're at today, where it basically took the idea of zodiac signs and then your birthday and then combined it into candles. Well, I'm not in that ideal market. This company literally took off once they developed this brand positioning. And now the next one, this one's going to seem a little bit different, and this was How to Listen with Intention, which sounds crazy because it's like, oh, you're listening to this right now. I know how to listen. I know I was that person. But there's nothing that's improved my sales, my marketing, my relationship better than learning how to listen better. More than learning how to listen better. Because I never truly realized at what level there was to listening, and simply, especially in the sales conversation, I'm thinking about where the conversation's going and taking them along a path, or in reality, when I just shut up, I just truly listened to where somebody's at, took the time to understand their situation, and just the little subtleties. It's even hard to put into words because it's partially a technique, but it's partially just connecting better with a human. And so even though I might be saying the same words or similar, it's just the connection is so much better. Then the sales process is seamless, and you're not pushy. You're just taking somebody along a journey and see if it makes sense at the end of it. But how to listen to intention. Last year I went through 5 reading books, reading books, 5 listening books, just trying to really hone in my skills on how to listen, and it was life changing for me, honestly, just because it affected so many parts of my life. I just didn't realize how selective my hearing was most of the time. Like, it was just not giving people nearly as much attention as they deserved. And once you can get to that empathetic level, game changer. All right, now the last one. This is a book I literally recommend to anybody that will listen to me, and that's Red Rising. This is the book that got me into reading fantasy books. I had read a little bit before I was going to bed, and that was a habit I started to develop. But then I started reading Red Rising, and it went from, oh, I'm just going to read 10 pages before I go to bed to help me fall asleep. By the way, huge habit. Highly recommend spending just minimum like reading 10 pages before you go to bed. Calms you down. You sleep way better. I've stepped it up now where I read almost an hour before bed, and it was because of this book. This book, first 100 pages, didn't have me. 200 pages, I was like, there's something to this. By 250 pages, things really start getting into it, and I did not put it down. And I tore through that, tore through the next, shoot, what is it? Well, book 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 in just a couple of months. And this is coming from somebody that was reading 10 pages a day, something like this. And now I've read through multiple books, from The Will of the Many to Malice and a couple others, and they're more in that fantasy fiction genre, and it really opened my eyes to really what fiction had to offer. Because I always looked at books as utility, like nonfiction. I want to learn a skill and get better at something, but Red Rising forced me to slow down a little bit, and just how reading a story made me a better storyteller. How seeing these characters develop helped me see parallels in how I'm developed. Just even getting into philosophical topics of life and death and what it means to be a good friend, and just the morality of you trying to do something good, but what downsides there are to it. Like Rising makes you think about it all, and that's what I absolutely loved about it, and completely addicted to just chasing that high and trying to find the next book that does that for me. So highly recommend, even if you don't read fiction or fantasy or sci-fi too much. This book is a great place to start. But that's it. I've got a huge reading list, so I'll probably be making more of that, because all back here, this is like next to read. And then over here, I've read a couple of these, but most of these are next to read. And then even, I don't think you can see it on the camera, but even below here, I have literally a whole basket of books. A whole basket of books that are next to read. Reading is one of my absolute favorite things, and one of the things that's made my life a million times better. So let me know what books I should add to my TBR.